We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live, Boxing Ego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Mayweather Promotions CEO Leonard Ellerbe questions the current clout chase between Demetrius Andrade and people pushing for the Charlo fight more than people that are on his actual platform. I'm gonna talk about all that and more. What up, fight world? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Listen, I don't know how you found my video, but somehow, some way, you made it. You arrived at the content. Reach one, teach one. Please help others find the content by throwing a like on this video. It's quick, it's painless, it's simple, and it really goes a long way to help others. Also, use my link in the description. The holidays are here, coming fast, Christmas. And if you need holiday gift ideas, consider the headphones, the Hibernation 5s, link in the description. You'll see an ad at the end of this video. Now, Boxing Reporter posted this. It was a tweet. It says, promoter Eddie Hearn pleads with the WBO and their president and the WBC to order Demetrius Andrade versus Jermall Charlo for the good of boxing. Read my story and subscribe. You will love it. To which Mayweather Promotions CEO seen this tweet, obviously, and had some questions, right? This is the response from Leonard Ellerbe. He says, am I missing something? Doesn't Jaime MUNGUIA, Gennady Max, Triple G Golovkin, and Danny Jacobs all fight on his platform? All are very good fighters, question mark. He's the only one with the big billion-dollar deal. He should go make the fights. Didn't he say people like Charlo, there are no fights for him at middleweight unless he fights on DAZN? Boom. And the reporter obviously seen that and says Charlo is the most intriguing fight. Don't play dumb. So, you know, he almost copped the attitude like he was angry. He said, don't play dumb. And Ellerby responded, Dan, don't you ever tell me I'm playing dumb. I made a comment about how all these dumbass comments are backfiring in his face. By the way, those are all fights he can make, and in my opinion, are very good fights that he can make. Now, the great Ego Stradamus strikes again. I mean, this is getting crazy. My track record in this game has become legendary. The great Ego Stradamus. If you notice, Leonard Ellerbe is telling the whole world via his social media what I've been telling you. Now, there's a lot of people that, you know, they see the steez, they see all the things we get right. Ego Stradamus, they see the streak, you know, often imitated, never duplicated. So there's a lot of people that said, oh, I told you, but they didn't really tell you. The people who can vouch for my channel that watch frequently will know I've said all these things. The videos, the content is still up. Now, what I'm referring to is Demetrius Andrade's options. Leonard Ellerbe is bringing up a great point. See, this is the problem with old media. Old media, they want to look in the face of certain problems and then overlook those problems and then create these like spin doctor narratives and attempt to refocus boxing on other like narratives and other points. What Leonard Ellerbe said is 1000% true. Eddie Hearn came over to America as a British promoter, very pompous. He says all the American promoters are going to be shaken in their boots. DAZN is coming, bye-bye pay-per-view. You know, we got $1 billion war chest. We got endless money. And he was talking ish. He was talking his talk. Unfortunately, none of what he said has come into fruition. In fact, it looks like, in my opinion, DAZN has decided to pretty much retreat from the US market. Now, they do have a couple fights, like Devin Haney's in a good fight with Jojo Diaz, and they might re-up a Golden Boy career. But what I mean by retreat is America is clearly not the same focus that it was in 2017, 2018 when they first arrived. So meaning it's not the main focus. They're looking at other areas like Triple G, Murata in Japan, and they brought DAZN over to the UK and Australia, things like that. So the US doesn't look like their primary focus. In fact, John Skipper, who used to work with DAZN, and he was the head guy in charge, he worked for ESPN, left there, and then went to DAZN. He has since left the company, and he talks about how the leadership and DAZN is a business model that is not sustainable. So that doesn't sound too good. Now, obviously, he has no particular vested interest now that he's left the company. But again, what he says, you guys can go find those articles and do the research like I've done. He basically said in a nutshell that the business model with secondary sports like boxing, if you don't have the rights to NBA and NFL, and you have these weird start times and just various things, you're all contained on a platform without the shoulder programming. All these things are problematic with this whole American takeover. And this is stuff I've said from the beginning. Now back to the Demetrius Andrade and Charlo situation. I've been very clear on my channel. I like Demetrius Andrade. I've pushed for him to get fights with Canelo Alvarez. I pushed for him to get big fights. However, me as a boxing reporter and a boxing commentator, I cannot care more about Demetrius Andrade flourishing than his own people. Demetrius Andrade, I don't have any kids. So, these fighters aren't my kids, so I got to call it like I see. And the fact of the matter is, like Leonard Ellerbe is saying, like I've said to you guys, Demetrius Andrade is a skilled fighter. You could say he's been avoided, and you could say he's also been mismanaged. And at times it looks like Andrade is almost content with that, getting, whatever he's getting, $2 million, $3 million to fight the Lucas Keelers. At the end of the day, like I said, I can't be more concerned with Demetrius Andrade, more concerned than his own team is for facilitating the fight. So to be honest, I'm kind of over it. I checked Demetrius Andrade's last fight. If he's in a fight, on Friday or whatever, and I'm around, I try to check it and support. But at the end of the day, the process is clearly broken when it comes to Demetrius Andrade and how he's been promoted. You would think when he left All-Star Boxing or the smaller promoter he was with, and he teamed up with Eddie Hearn, all these grandiose things that Eddie Hearn said were going to come true and were now going to be a reality, none of them have happened. So Leonard Ellerbe and your boy Ego, 1,000% right. Eddie Hearn came over to America talking that talk, and he even threatened PBC. He constantly took digs at them, said Showtime would be out of business, which is the farthest thing from the truth. This year alone, Showtime has had Floyd Mayweather come out of retirement, do over $1 million with the YouTuber Logan Paul. They're about to have Gervonta Tank Davis for a second time on pay-per-view fight. And it looks like they'll probably get Charlo fight. I don't know if it goes to Showtime or Fox, but they've also have Jake Paul fighting for the second time on pay-per-view, did a deal with them, etc., etc. So all in all, what Eddie Hearn said wasn't true about Showtime being out of business. And another thing that Leonard Ellerbe pointed out that he said that is not true, he says that Jermall Charlo cannot become a star unless he fights on DAZN. So you notice over the course of the last few years since Eddie Hearn came out with all that BS and was saying these things, after he's been proven wrong, he's gone radio silent and he's just switching the narrative. Now he's begging the WBO and the WBC to clout chase Jermall Charlo and push for that fight and that fight primarily. And you see it on the DAZN network. Chris Mannix did the same thing. He keeps saying that this is the best fight in boxing. This is the biggest fight, Charlo versus Andrade, yada, yada, yada. Now they're begging the sanctioning bodies to push for a unification. And, it doesn't frequently happen because champions aren't ranked in the sanctioning bodies because they're champions. So Jermall Charlo is not ranked within the WBO. and Demetrius Andrade is not ranked within the WBC. Now, they've done it before where they kind of push for a fight and order it, but the WBC just did their annual convention and they didn't say ish about no Demetrius Andrade and Charlo must fight and all that. So this looks pathetic and it looks super desperate. And what myself and Leonard Ellerbe continue to say is 1,000% true. You know, why would the focus, and this is again an old media tactic, clout chase? So just feed it. Like, old media is a bunch of leeches, and a leech needs a source. You know, it's like a parasite. A parasite needs a host. And that's what we're seeing more often than not in boxing. Instead of promoting fighters from the grassroots, blue collar promotion, you know, getting on the ground, getting a street team, throwing ads on TV, doing billboards, you know, doing shoulder programming. Boxing promoters and networks are oftentimes getting lazy, some of them, and them or the fighter or whoever just attaches themselves like a parasite does to a host, and they try to leech off the person's name. That's why you see a lot of people talking about Gervonta Davis, Jermall Charlo, him and his brother, big houses, and you know, they're lit, making money, and then you see them. Now, I understand boxing is competition and, you know, the best versus the best, but herein lies the problem. Demetrius Andrade, like we keep saying, Leonard Ellerbe and myself, is housed on DAZN with, in the last few years, let's say 8 names that he could have fought. DAZN has given him 0 of those names. So you can't say, oh, Triple G's too old now, because Triple G, he had his first fight on DAZN and it was Steve Rolls. So if he's too old now, then why didn't you give Demetrius Andrade the Triple G fight instead of Steve Rolls, a guy nobody had heard of, right? You had Canelo for like 6 fights on DAZN, Rocky Fielding, Danny Jacobs, right? Kovalev, Calum, Billy Joe Saunders, etc. Yildirim, all these fights, and Canelo never fought Demetrius Andrade. Triple G fought another miserable fight that nobody asked for. So Triple G, his reign on DAZN is horrible. He had one good fight that was a mandatory, and he had already ducked the person before, Derevyanchenko, and refused to fight him. So it would have looked horrific if Triple G would have decided to avoid Derevyanchenko again. So he wasn't a champion, and it was for his positioning and ranking. And you see why he ducked Derevyanchenko, because Derevyanchenko gave him a tough fight, even hurt him in that particular fight. And I think Derevyanchenko really won that fight. And Triple G, out of 3 fights, that was his only good fight. And I think he should have lost that fight. You know, he's fighting Camille Sesmeta, and now he's fighting Ryota Murata, another fight that no one asked for in Japan, right? And old media and Eddie Hearn and Demetrius Andrade, I guess they feel they're going to just keep clout chasing Jermall Charlo as if he's the only fighter around. But Triple G, there was a time before he was scheduled to fight Murata. Why didn't they look at Triple G? Remember when Demetrius Andrade beat Liam Williams earlier this year, Eddie Hearn, who manages Triple G, who's been working with Canelo, and he says he's on Canelo's team and Canelo's promoter, how come Eddie Hearn hasn't given Demetrius Andrade any of these fights? Why is Eddie Hearn making Ryota Murata instead of taking care of his American Olympian undefeated champion, right? You work with Triple G and you work with Demetrius Andrade. So the boxing reporter who's arguing with Leonard Ellerbe, he's trying to play the role and say, oh, Charlo versus Andrade is good stuff. But there's a lot of people, including myself, that have been wanting to see Triple G. Hell no, guys, hey, Max. Yeah, everybody. No, it's nothing. Big drama, right? They wanted to see Triple G fight against Demetrius Andrade. They wanted to see Canelo fight against Demetrius Andrade. But once again, herein lies the problem. Old media only wants to put pressure on the PBC fighter who already has a poppin' brand, Jermall Charlo, and again is the inherently hardest fight to make because of the different neighboring, contracts and different promoters, and they want to overlook the real problem. Like I've said time and time again, The real problem is how come Demetrius Andrade is on DAZN. Canelo fought 6 fights there. Triple G fought 3 fights there. You had Billy Joe Saunders before he retired. He gets Canelo. He was never forced to fight Demetrius Andrade, a fight that was supposed to happen until Andrade found out that Billy Joe Saunders failed a VADA test and the fight got canceled. But when he got reinstated, they could have rescheduled it. They didn't. They put him on the Logan Paul KSI undercard and paid him like close to $1 million to fight a guy, and he didn't even look good. Why didn't you put Andrade on that card, right? Caleb Smith versus Andrade. There was a point where you brought Derievchenko and Chavez Jr. to fight other middleweights, right? Why didn't either of those guys get the opportunity to mix it with Demetrius Andrade? Then you just seen Jaime Munguia, who is Demetrius Andrade's mandatory, and he just fought Gabe Rosado. Danny Jacobs fought Gabe Rosado. So Danny Jacobs already has a good resume because he fought Canelo, he fought Triple G, he fought Luis Cuba Arias when he was undefeated, he fought Derievchenko, right? He fought Chavez Jr. And Eddie Hearn gave Danny Jacobs Gabe Rosado, a respected warrior, and then later they gave him to Jaime Munguia, but no one's giving him to Demetrius Andrade. So I don't feel sorry for Demetrius Andrade. I'm sorry. I don't feel sorry because part of boxing is the business of boxing and who you get in bed with. So if your own team ain't looking out for your best interest, then it's kind of tough titty. You know what I mean? And I feel like Andrade is Bud Crawford 2.0. It's a very similar conundrum that they're in. Undefeated Black American talented fighters, skilled fighters who could both fight out of the southpaw stance, but business-wise, they've made whatever decisions they were comfortable with, and their teams have not secured the big fights. Terrence Crawford just stood up to Bob Arum after the Sean Porter fight and told you what I've been telling you. And he says, Bob wasn't able to give me the Errol Spence fight. So people want to blame Errol Spence and the PBC fighters and say, oh, how could Terrence Crawford look his promoter in the face after he knocked out Sean Porter, and he literally said, Bob Arum hasn't been able to get me the fights like Errol Spence fights, so how's he going to give me a fight now? But then people are saying Errol Spence is ducking. Same thing with Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. That's why I said Andrade is like Bud Crawford 2.0. You know, it's easy to place blame and point the finger, but I think there's way bigger issues, like how come Eddie Hearn works with Canelo for 6 fights, works with Andrade, works with Caleb Smith, works with Rocky Fielding, works with Triple G, and worked with Billy Joe Saunders, and none of these guys are being fed to Andrade. And then he did business with Golden Boy, right, to make certain fights, like Canelo Jacobs was when Canelo was with Golden Boy. Jaime Munguia is the mandatory for Andrade, and he's a Golden Boy fighter, but DAZN and certain boxing reporters and old media keep pressing and pushing for Andrade versus Charlo only. But over the last several years, as I repeatedly keep telling you, and Leonard Ellerbe is saying, there's great fights for Andrade right where he's at. And Eddie Hearn came in the game talking that talk, saying Showtime's going to be out of business and Charlo needs to go to DAZN. So that's not this type of stuff I would imagine if you want to do business with people, which is why when Canelo fought a PBC fighter, Caleb Plant, you didn't really see Eddie Hearn too much involved. So again, Andrade versus Charlo is inherently harder to make than all these other fights with Andrade and Canelo when he was on DAZN, Andrade and Triple G, Andrade and his mandatory Jaime Munguia. But they refuse, they being DAZN, to make any of those fights. And then they brought guys like Chavez Jr. and Derievchenko, and they won't even make Andrade versus those guys. So therefore, Andrade's resume looks lackluster, and people are complaining like, oh man, when are you gonna fight? So even Canelo, the great Canelo, said to him, he said, come on, man, you fight nobody. He's like, payday, you unpaid, you know, and try to embarrass him. But Andrade's also been mismanaged, and his partnership with Eddie Hearn has allowed for that. You got several people Andrade could have fought, and they won't match those people with him. They won't force it. Eddie Hearn will get on the mic after the Liam Williams fight and say, oh, somebody needs to step up and fight Andrade, please. But then you make Triple G versus Murata. So if Andrade is looking at Charlo, and old media is trying to push this narrative like Charlo is running from Andrade, he got to look in the mirror and he got to look at his own promoter to see, hey, man, like, how do you manage Canelo at a point in time? You know, you're working with him, you're working with Triple G, you're working with me, you're working with Caleb Smith, and I can't get none of these fights. And you've done fights with Golden Boy. How you make these Golden Boy Canelo fights like Danny Jacobs and Rocky Fielding? That was Golden Boy and Matchroom, you know, working together. Why can't you work with Golden Boy yet again to make the Jaime Munguia fight? So fighters got to start being accountable for the decisions they make. And ultimately, sometimes it's who you sign to and the timing and what your team can facilitate for you. Point blank, period. So it's becoming a lost cause with Andre because people don't want to fight him and his team can't make the fights or whatever's happening. But this is why he's the odd man out. And now old media is trying to create this pressure, and Eddie Hearn's trying to create pressure through the sanctioning bodies, which looks uber desperate, and it looks like they're clout chasing to try to give Andrade a fight. You know, it shouldn't be that hard, especially if you're, you know, a top level promoter. You make the fight. You make it make sense for Triple G, and you make it make sense for Andrade, and make the fight. But old media wants to act like Triple G and Andrade isn't a fight we've been asking for 9 years, to only talk about Charlo, you know, and try to put this fake pressure knowing it's not likely to happen. Corny. Let me know how I did in this video. Subscribe to my channel. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. We unpack. The future is now. The Hibernation 5s by Kenichi Bear. Hybrid gaming and lifestyle headphones. Out of the box, you can connect to any console or PC. Bluetooth ready with a low latency USB adapter, color RGB, and extreme bass mode. The Hibernation 5s adjust to you. Whether you need a gaming, travel, gym, or lifestyle headphones, the Hibernations got you covered. The new Hibernation 5s, link in the description. Customize the way you hear the world. Welcome to the nation. Are you tired of your YouTube videos not getting any views? Well, consider TubeBuddy. I've used TubeBuddy for years to scale up my YouTube channel. Now we're sitting over 200,000 subscribers. TubeBuddy is a browser extension that offers a ton of built-in productivity and time-saving services to take your channel to the next level. Use my link in the description to get started with TubeBuddy and level up your channel faster. We working.